presidential election, nationalist Marine Le Pen locked in a tight race with centrist Emmanuel Macron. Le Pen's potential victory raising questions about the possibility of France exiting the European Union, just like Britain did before. Let's bring in Nile Gardiner right now. He's director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation, also a former aide to Margaret Thatcher. Sir, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Great to see you, Maria. Thank you.
How do you think this plays out?
Well, I think it's going to be an extremely tight race. We're going to have a clear idea at about 2 o'clock this afternoon, U.S. Eastern Time, when the first exit polls are produced. But the front runners at the moment clearly are Marine Le Pen of the Front National and also Emmanuel Macron, who is running as an independent candidate. And I think that you're likely to see those two moving forward to the second round, which takes place in 2 weeks' time. And of course, quite different competing visions from Le Pen and Macron. So I think it's going to be an extremely interesting race. At the same time, however, certainly there have been strong challenges from François Fillon, the traditional conservative candidate, and also from Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is a hard-left Trotskyist communist. So a wide array of candidates in this French race, with major implications, of course, for the future of France and for Europe.
And Le Pen, of course, has been talking about securing the borders, very much talking about getting control of their borders in France. So after the terrorist attack that took place this week, did the polls change at all? Did people fear that perhaps terrorism is still happening and maybe they need a leader in that regard? Did they sway toward Le Pen any after the terrorist attack?
I think that, as expected, there will be a slight boost for Le Pen at the polls, I think, following the terrorist attack in France earlier this week. And Le Pen, of course, is running on a platform of tighter border control, a hard-line anti-Islamist platform as well. And, of course, France is in a state of fear at this time. I mean, this is a country that has undergone a series of major terrorist attacks. There's widespread concern with regard to the Islamist terror threat. François Hollande, the French president, really has been far too weak in terms of standing up to the terror threat. And so all of the candidates certainly have been talking about the terror threat. Certainly Le Pen and François Fillon have been the toughest candidates on this particular issue.
Well, I mean, you're talking about, what, 6 terrorist attacks in a very short period of time in France alone just recently. What do you think the implications of a Le Pen victory would have, like, for example, on the markets? The Wall Street Journal, of course, over the weekend wrote a piece basically saying that markets might sell off around the world if Le Pen wins. What's your take on that?
I think that Le Pen could well emerge as the front runner from the first round of the election held today. I think that it's much harder for her, of course, to win the second round in 2 weeks' time. Most polls show that Emmanuel Macron would defeat Le Pen in the second round. Having said that, of course, this is a time of tremendous change in Europe, and nothing is absolutely certain. But certainly if Le Pen emerges as the front runner from the first round today, certainly that will hit the markets hard, I think, in France and across Europe, possibly here in the United States as well. And I think it's going to be a very, very tough contest over the next 2 weeks. But Emmanuel Macron, who is a sort of, I would describe as a sort of limousine liberal, sort of champagne socialist type politician, is clearly the favourite to win the second round.
Yeah.
But I think that Macron really represents business as usual for France,
yeah,
and I don't think you're going to see much change.
We should point out, though, that these are probably the same people who predicted, the U.S. market would sell off if Donald Trump became president, and in fact, it was the complete opposite, where markets rallied because of his economic plans.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could see anything happening in terms of market reaction. Of course, the big question, of course, of France is whether or not France goes down the path of leaving the European Union. And 2 of the candidates, Marine Le Pen and Jean-Luc Mélenchon, have proposed that line. Macron or Fillon are against a French exit or Frexit taking place. But certainly, I think the markets would react if there was a suggestion that France could possibly leave the European Union. But let's not forget, of course, that following the British referendum on the issue of leaving the EU, the markets went down momentarily, but then they shot back up. And I think that you have in Brexit certainly now tremendous economic confidence in the United Kingdom. Brexit is proving to be a great success for Britain, and the markets have actually soared overall. since the Brexit referendum.
Now, you make a lot of good points. Niall, good to see you, sir. Thanks very much for weighing in this morning. Nile Gardiner there. North Korea, meanwhile, is threatening to sink a U.S. aircraft carrier. And then there's this. The former U.S.